Hello and welcome to Chili Bee Gaming. I'm Evie and today we're going to be doing a post-play review of Assassin's Creed Syndicate and its DLC, Jack the Ripper. Originally released in 2015, Syndicate is the 9th major instalment in the Assassin's Creed franchise. It follows the story of twin assassins Jacob Frye and Evie Frye as they arrive in London in 1868, right in the middle of the ongoing war between the Assassins and the Templars. Jacob wants to reclaim London by taking control of the gangs across the city boroughs, while Evie is searching for the powerful Shroud of Eden, an artifact said to grant rapid healing, immortality, and incredible strength. But they're not the only ones looking for it. Templar Grandmaster Crawford Starrick is hunting the Shroud as well. So today I'm going to talk about the characters, the story, what I loved about the game, what frustrated me, and whether it's worth playing. Throughout my playthrough, I switch between the twins quite often. Jacob Frye is definitely the more hands-on character. He's strong in physical combat, able to move bodies and explosives easily, and he's great for things like gang strongholds and fight club side missions. However, when it comes to stealth, Jacob can feel a bit clumsy. His personality definitely reflects that gameplay style too. He's bold, cocky, and sometimes a little bit arrogant, which actually makes him quite entertaining. He provides some comic relief during the story, which is much needed at points. Evie Frye is the complete opposite. She's quieter, more thoughtful, and much more stealth-focused. Her movement feels smoother and more precise, which makes her perfect for missions like Templar assassinations or child liberation tasks that require careful stealth. She's also clearly the more scholarly of the two, showing a strong interest in the assassin lore and preferring quiet study over Jacob's chaotic style. Out of the two, I personally preferred playing as Evie. Stealth is such a core part of the Assassin Brotherhood's identity, and Evie just fits that playstyle perfectly. Her throwing knives, her smooth movement and stealth advantages made missions feel more satisfying. Jacob definitely has his place though. His brute strength and gunplay made him much better suited to missions where fighting your way through enemies was unavoidable. As someone who's still fairly new to the Assassin's Creed universe, my knowledge of the deeper Brotherhood lore is limited. But honestly, I don't think that impacted my enjoyment of the story very much. The main plot is very straightforward. The twins arrive in London and meet assassin ally Henry Green. Evie focuses on locating the Shroud of Eden, while Jacob focuses on liberating London boroughs from the Templars. Different approaches, but ultimately the same goal: stop the Templars. Overall, I found the story engaging and enjoyable. However, there were a few characters that felt slightly underdeveloped. One example is Lucy Thorne. She's an interesting antagonist and fun to confront in the story, but her overall purpose feels a bit unclear. Similarly, Starrick himself is certainly menacing, but he mostly appears in cutscenes ordering others to do the work and monologuing in his office. Personally, I think it would have made him much more threatening if we'd encountered him more directly throughout the story out in the world of London. Syndicate has a lot of side content, and some of my favourites were the missions involving real historical figures. We encounter people such as Alexander Graham Bell, Karl Marx, and even Queen Victoria herself. Each of them provides unique and entertaining quests, but one of the standouts for me was the missions with Charles Dickens and his Ghost Club investigations, where we explore some of London's ghostly stories. Other borough activities, like the Templar hunts or child liberation missions, were good, a little bit repetitive, but they were still very enjoyable. I think the one activity that I really struggled with was the bounty hunts, because they were quite difficult and they were occasionally frustrating because I had to repeat them so many times. One of my favourite aspects of Syndicate was its historical setting. Victorian London during the Second Industrial Revolution is beautifully recreated. Locations like St Paul's Cathedral and Green Park are incredibly detailed and recognisable, and the world feels alive thanks to the NPCs that we come across during our walks through the streets of London. We hear street vendors shouting about the goods, children being scolded by the parents, beggars asking for money, and crowds discussing the events of the day. It all makes the city feel like it's dirty and it's crowded, but it's full of life and it's full of opportunity. Another thing I really enjoyed was the relationship between Jacob and Evie. They argue pretty frequently because they have very different philosophies about how to defeat the Templars. Jacob is impulsive and chaotic, Evie's more methodical and cautious. The father's legacy within the Brotherhood does seem to influence them both differently as well. But despite the differences, it's clear that when they actually work together, they are incredibly effective. There are also some interesting relationships with other characters. Evie slowly develops a romance with Henry Green throughout the story, and once we've collected all the pressed flowers, you do eventually learn that Henry proposed to Evie and they later get married. Jacob, on the other hand, he doesn't really have a romantic storyline as such. He's more focused on having fun and causing chaos and teasing Freddie Aberline whenever they meet. But one of his sort of relationships, kind of a friendship, is with Maxwell Roth. At first they work together to disrupt Templar operations, but Roth does eventually reveal that he's simply using Jacob to spread a bit of chaos across London. And when this betrayal happens, it feels like Jacob is genuinely quite hurt by it. While I did enjoy the gameplay overall, I did have some issues. The movement mechanics could sometimes feel very clunky or unresponsive, and during missions when you've got to follow targets or reach locations within time limits, it can be very frustrating, and it did result in me having to repeat missions quite a lot. Another issue was the sheer number of collectibles in this game. There are a lot. There were 320 chests, 50 illustrations, 180 helix glitches, 20 vintage beer bottles, and 30 pressed flowers, just to name a few. I think of all of them, the helix glitches were easily the most frustrating to collect because some of them were located in such awkward and difficult spots it took an age to get to them. Some collectibles also felt a little bit pointless or underdeveloped. For example, the Royal Correspondence Letters, while they offered an insight into the monarchy of the time, there wasn't much of a reason to collect them other than that, and getting the reward of the cape for Evie. Finally, I was slightly disappointed by the limited customization options. You can change outfits for Jacob and Evie and even change some of the colours of them, but you can't customise your train hideout, how it looks, how it's organised. You can't change the appearance of any of your weapons, and I think it would have just been a really nice addition to have for the player. I also played the Jack the Ripper DLC expansion, which takes place 20 years later in 1888. London is now in the grip of terror as the infamous killer Jack the Ripper stalks the streets of Whitechapel. Jacob attempts to stop him, but discovers something pretty shocking. Jack was once his apprentice within the Assassin Brotherhood, and after a brutal confrontation, Jack captures Jacob and leaves London without assassin protection. Thankfully, Jacob had the good sense to write to Evie and inform her of the goings-on in London before he was captured. Evie arrives from India to investigate the murders, and after she's spoken to Frederick Aberline, she also learns that she's got to find her missing brother. I've always had an interest in true crime, and the story of Jack the Ripper is one of the most famous unsolved cases in history. I thought Ubisoft handled the story quite creatively. Making Jack a former assassin's apprentice was a unique take, I feel. Since the killer's real identity is still unknown, it makes sense that they had to take some artistic liberties in the story. But once again, they did keep the historical atmosphere pretty true to life. The NPC's conversations about the murders and the fear spreading throughout the streets really did capture the tension of Whitechapel during these killings. However, the story did leave me with a lot of unanswered questions, such as, why did Jack never become a full assassin? Why does he seem to hate Jacob so much? And what actually drove him to become a killer? There's a small hint about something involving his mother, but it's never really fully explained. The ending also felt a little bit rushed. After tracking all these clues across London, the final confrontation happens at Lambeth Asylum, where we basically find Jacob imprisoned and defeat Jack in the basement. But after that, the story just ends. We never learn whether Jacob fully recovered, or how the murders were officially explained, or whether Evie stayed in London or returned to India. In some ways, the mystery remains, just like the real Jack the Ripper case, unsolved. Overall, I really enjoyed playing Assassin's Creed Syndicate and even the Jack the Ripper DLC. The Fry twins were great protagonists, each bringing their own personality and gameplay style. The historical setting feels incredibly immersive, and the world of Victorian London is beautifully realised. Even though there were some mechanical frustrations and a few storytelling gaps, the experience was still very enjoyable. This is only the second Assassin's Creed game I've ever played, but it's definitely made me curious to explore more of the series and see where the Brotherhood takes us next. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this review, please do make sure to like the video and subscribe to Chili Bee Gaming, because we're going to be doing more playthroughs and possibly more reviews. And do let me know in the comments below, if you've played Syndicate, what did you think of it? Did you play Jack the Ripper DLC? Did you enjoy it? Let me know. So until next time, be safe, be good, and look after yourselves.